Hi, and welcome to Across the Desk. This week we have Representative Mickey Dollens with us today, and we're going to talk about some of the things that are going on in the legislature. That's all this week, right here on Across the Desk. Hi, Mickey. First thing I want to say is thank you for appearing on the show. It means so much to me that you would take the time out of your busy schedule, because I know how busy it is down there, to come on my YouTube channel and give an interview. Thank you very much. That's the first thing I want to say.
Well, Kit, thank you so much for having me. I'm a big fan of your show.
Oh, thanks.
And
I appreciate that.
Appreciate all the viewers tuning in today. Looking forward to talking a little bit about what's going on in the legislature and where we're going forward. So happy to be here.
Thank you very much. So tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We just had a higher education day, and so I met with a lot of students, and one of the top questions they would ask is, how did you get involved in politics? And I said, whose first time is it at the Capitol? And I'd say more than half of everyone's hands go up. And I said, well, that's great. Who wants to run for office someday? And then about half the hands go down. And I was like, well, you're in a good position, because I never really came to the Capitol. I grew up in Bartlesville, Oklahoma, which is in green country, northeast part of the state. I'm a fifth-generation Oklahoman. My great-grandfather, my grandfather, and my dad all worked for Phillips 66. My dad was the first one to move from the fields and into the office. He graduated from OSU, and my mom graduated from OU. And growing up, I just wanted to play college football anywhere, so I never really took a side. But played football at Bartlesville. Our team was terrible. We won 3 games my junior year, 1 game my senior year. But somehow I managed to get a full-ride football scholarship to Division I school in Dallas, Texas, Southern Methodist University. And so I went down to Dallas, and man, that was a huge eye-opener, a huge change in perspective from small-town Bartlesville to Dallas. But it was amazing. I was opened up to a lot of opportunity and possibilities I frankly didn't know existed. And that was a very formative part of my life. And ended up graduating with a degree in English.
Oh, wow.
And in 2011, unfortunately, my brother, he died unexpectedly, and he'd always wanted me to try out for the NFL. And so I decided to honor him and channel a lot of that emotional energy into trying out for the NFL. So I did the pro day, and I performed pretty well, but I did not get drafted. About a week later, the United States bobsledding team called me and asked if I wanted to try out for the 4-man bobsled team. And at that point, the only kind of recollection I had of bobsled was from the movie Cool Runnings, a Disney movie with the Jamaican bobsled team. And so I was already in pretty good shape from the pro day, so I went up to Lake Placid, New York, and did another combine tryout. And thankfully, a former gold medalist on the skeleton team, who was making a comeback as a bobsled driver, asked me to be the second pusher on his 4-man bobsled team. And from there, I got to continue that camaraderie and a lot of that teamwork that I needed while I was recovering or healing from the loss of my younger brother. He was only 18 years old at the time. I was 23. And I had the opportunity to travel across, up in Canada, and then eventually internationally, and represent the United States of America against teams in Austria and Switzerland and Europe. And it was much like going from Bartlesville to Dallas. Going from America to overseas was a huge eye-opener. And eventually I came back to Oklahoma in 2014. I got a job as a roughneck on a drilling rig, just like 3 generations before me, and was in the oil fields for about 1.5 years. And at this point, oil was tanking hard in Oklahoma. And it came to the point where we had to lay the rigs over, and we were all laid off. Now, I had a college degree to fall back on, a degree in English with a specialization in creative writing. And so I used that to go into teaching, but unfortunately, a lot of my friends who I worked with on the rig who didn't have college degrees pretty much survived off the oil field. So, and the boom and bust, they were just kind of waiting for the next boom, and that was kind of the first time the term economic diversification wasn't in my vocabulary, but I knew that Oklahoma needed to do something and invest in good paying jobs, or in an industry that would provide good paying jobs for people like my friends. And so I became an English teacher at U.S. Grant High School. I loved it so much. I think my second year I got a mortgage on a house right down the road, and was really enjoying it. I taught English, college preparatory class called AVID, and a senior leadership class. Unfortunately, in 2015-ish, 2016, trickle-down economics in the state for the previous decade came to
Yeah.
a crashing halt.
Yeah.
Revenue was down, oil was down, draconian budget cuts, especially to public education.
Oh yeah.
And as a result, schools across the state went to 4-day school weeks. There was over 800 teachers that were laid off, and unfortunately I was one of them.
Now I saw something where before Brad Henry left, we were like number 17 in education, and now we're near the bottom.
Well, currently we're
true,
we're yeah, I mean that's correct. After the Republicans have had control of the government for a relatively short period of time in our total state's history.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a lot of metrics like that, being ranked number 17th in the country in education, we are currently 49th. And a lot of that is because of not investing correctly in public education, not being able to recruit and retain high-quality teachers. So
over 2,500 emergency certificates this year.
That's correct. And we don't have a teacher shortage, we have a teacher flight. That's
Yeah.
what State Superintendent Gina Nelson used to always say on the campaign trail. And right now there are over 30,000 people in Oklahoma who have valid teaching certificates, licenses,
they're just not doing
who are
it.
doing other jobs where they're more respected and compensated to be able to provide for their families. So I was one of the 800 teachers in 2016 that were laid off, and so I decided that I would start advocating for my students and fellow teachers from inside the classroom, from inside the Capitol instead of outside in the classroom. And then I started going door to door, and I ran on mental health, economic diversification for my friends on the rig, mental health for people like my brother, and education so fellow teachers and future students wouldn't have to go through what I had gone through and what so many other people had to go through as well. And I flipped a Republican seat in District 93, and ever since then I've been reelected. It's been the honor of a lifetime.
In 93, that's southwest Oklahoma County pretty much?
Yeah, southwest Oklahoma County. I've got U.S. Grant High School, Capitol Hill. OCCC is just on the other side of May. So it's right on that Cleveland County, Oklahoma County line, and we represent 38,500 people roughly. And it's been the honor of a lifetime. And I tell you, it's...
you're in your 7th year now?
I'm in my 7th year, 4th term. And while we have made improvements in a lot of those areas that I ran on, there's still so much work to do, and especially the state of education today, public education, and the front and the attack that we're seeing on a daily basis from our state leaders is of utmost importance, because now I have a 3- and 4-year-old who will soon be in public schools. They're not quite of age, but they will be soon, and we have to make sure that we're doing everything we can for the future of this state so that they have every opportunity to reach their full potential.
So the legislature is in session now. It's been in there for a couple of weeks. What's been going on? What happened this week?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the first week is kind of a lot of formalities and working through the committees and getting bills heard, and the second week is very similar, a lot of committee work. And this third week that we're going to be coming up on, you're going to see a lot of those bills that were coming out of committee start going to the House floor. And then we'll start to see about equal work. And then 2 weeks from now, we'll have a deadline for all the committee bills have to be out of committee and onto the floor. And we'll hear a lot of questions and debates, especially on some of the more contentious bills that we've heard. Personally, I've filed 8 bills, and one of those was ranked choice voting and an independent redistricting committee to end gerrymandering that would go to the vote of the people. Unfortunately, those were not even given a committee hearing.
Either one wasn't?
No,
really?
Unfortunately not.
Ranked choice voting, I'm a big supporter of that.
You know,
and when you put that out and I saw that, I was like, oh wow, I really love this. I'm really a big fan.
I heard the same from a lot of my Republican colleagues, because it discourages negative campaigning. It creates a electorate, or it creates a campaign environment where you don't have to pander to the fringes of your base in order to move on to a primary. And
it costs a lot of money to run just a small election with all the printing and everything that goes into it. There's a lot of money there that could be saved through ranked choice voting as well, I think.
That's right, kid. With ranked choice voting, you don't have to have runoff elections.
Yeah.
And it's more representative of the actual more popular person who's going to win in ranked choice voting.
I'm really sad that didn't really get anywhere.
Well, progress is small incremental steps, and in anything in government, it takes time to chip away. And I think that eventually, through the time, it will start to gain speed. I remember in 2018, one of the first bills I passed was the industrial hemp pilot program.
Okay,
and when I was pitching that about how farmers haven't had the opportunity to legally grow hemp since 1937, I believe. And people were saying, no, this is the reddest state in the country. We're not going to be able to have that. It's not going to happen. And building those bridges and having Florida or ECHLA sign on was a help too. So eventually, industrial hemp passed, and farmers growing it and making textiles and building materials, of course CBD oil, and then that I feel like opened up a pathway toward medical marijuana, and then of course 820 in March, and so it that was also 5 years ago, and so with ranked choice voting, I do think that there's no stopping an idea whose time has come, and I think that ranked choice voting will just be a matter of time before we get there.
When everybody can coalesce behind that, I think, and it'll be a popular thing.
I think so.
So you put in 8 bills, or anything with any of those that we should know about, or any of those moving forward, or what do you have going on?
I'm actually pretty excited. A couple days ago I had a bill pass out of committee, and it's important on the battle against fentanyl overdoses and death. What this does is it clears up any ambiguity around the legality of fentanyl testing strips. And so much like the Safe Needle Exchange program, where we don't condone drug use, but gosh, if you're going to do it, make sure you're not compounding it with diseases. Much like this.
And you can cause, again, costing society a bunch of money when you're addicted to stuff and when we handle it the wrong way.
Well, that's right. We want to rehabilitate people, get them on the journey toward healing, but the key to doing that is making sure they're alive. And unfortunately, people who are taking, say, cocaine, for example, or ecstasy, that could be laced if it, purchased off the illicit market. And this gives people an opportunity to drug check and make sure that what they're taking is exactly what they think they're taking, and it's not laced with deadly fentanyl, synthetic fentanyl. And so now, nonprofits, if this bill continues as I expect it will, because I have a Republican Senate author in Tulsa named Dave Rader, and he's going to carry it over in the Senate, but if it's signed into law, then the nonprofits, we have the wonderful nonprofits across the state, many of whom address people with addiction issues, will be able to hand out these fentanyl testing strips to people on their road toward recovery, and eventually, hopefully, toward the path toward sobriety. But no, these aren't subsidized by the government or anything like that. It's just there's a lot of ambiguity around whether or not a fentanyl test strip is considered drug paraphernalia. But what this does is put it in statute to say it absolutely is not, and it's illegal to have and carry on your person.
That's good. That's a good thing. Now, you got a lot of support behind that, it sounds like, both sides of the aisle and everything. It sounds like a bipartisan deal that people really want to. This is an issue. This is a public health issue that people really want action on, and it looks like we're getting that a little bit.
That's right. And another great bipartisan bill that just passed out of committee is a bill that I co-authored with Representative Dobrinsky, and that says that victims of domestic violence can establish a household and not have to pay the deposit on utility bills.
Oh, that's a good one, because utility bills are a big, getting those established is a problem for a lot of people.
Well, it's expensive.
It's expensive.
And for example, just a down deposit on an initial deposit on an OG&E bill can be upward to $400. And then water and lighting, all of that stuff can really add up. And a lot of times, in a situation with domestic violence, power and control is a big aspect of that. So that the person who's fleeing that environment may not have any access or credibility to show that they've been paying on this for years.
Especially if they've been controlled by an abuser who controlled every aspect of their life. They wouldn't have the means to really jump through a few hoops to get stuff set up.
That's right.
See that.
And so under this bill, there are 3 ways to qualify for this. You either have a VPO order, a written statement from a police officer, or a letter from a shelter. And then once you have that, then it's waived for 90 days.
All right.
And then you can get your utilities turned on immediately, get you and your loved ones in a safe environment, and hopefully continue on a more safe journey.
That's good. And that one, is that in committee, or did it pass out of committee? Is that what you said?
Yes, it passed out of committee, and now it's eligible to be heard on the House floor until about mid-March, which is the deadline for all House bills to have been heard, and then they switch chambers. House bills will go to the Senate, and vice versa, Senate to the House. Okay, you mentioned pushing buttons, and that makes me think of the looming threat of automation and job displacement that is already happening. I remember when I first started drilling, when I was a roughneck on a drilling rig, I worked on a rig that was a vertical drill, so it just went straight down. It was built in the 1970s. It took at least 5 people on the rig floor to operate. We did everything by hand, threw the chain, used the tongs, all of that, just like the old timers did. And whenever oil busted, that particular rig, because it was so small, the company only owned 3 rigs. We laid them all over, and we all went looking for work. And I actually got employed by Aubrey McClendon's company at that time. It was called Nomac. It was a sister company. And I remember stepping foot on that rig, and it was a horizontal well, so fracking rig, and I stepped foot on there, and a lot of the things that we had done by hand had turned into automation. Now that's great from a safety perspective, but that was also about 3 jobs on the rig floor that were no longer needed. And eventually I ended up getting a bad foot injury on the rig, and I retired from the oil fields, and that's when I became a teacher. But looking forward, we definitely have to look into and be and acknowledge and be aware of the automation, and especially new technologies like ChatGPT that will. So in the past, it was all about automation replacing kind of mundane, repetitive jobs, and especially in the blue collar industries. But now we're looking at like paralegals and even like CPAs and especially journalists. Like ChatGPT changes everything, and it really is going to affect a lot of white collar jobs as well.
Oh, I see that a lot in engineering as well. Because actually, besides doing a show and performing arts and stuff like that, I'm actually a geomatic engineer. I do hydrology and floodplain management, a little bit of surveying work with that. And I can tell you just from this land surveying end, used to have crews back a long time ago. You'd have over 3 people on a crew, and even in the 1980s, you'd have 3-man crews. Now with GPS and robotic total stations and everything else, it's 1-man crews. So you only have 1 man. So yeah, that's gone down a whole lot, especially on the engineering end. A lot of the automation, even with CAD drawings and stuff like that as well.
And then on the flip side, as new industries come about from technology, there's going to be a lot more jobs to offset those that are being displaced. But it's still something to be conscientious of. I know that when I ran in the beginning for economic diversification, that bill that I wrote and passed with Floor Leader Eccles, the Industrial Hemp Pilot Program, which eventually led to the medical marijuana bill, has created tens of thousands of jobs and millions of dollars in revenue. So we continue to expand in the marijuana industry, wind and solar. There's a lot of potential in Oklahoma, especially with aviation as well, to continue bringing in new jobs and factories and companies, frankly. But we have to be very cognizant about our social policies. The social divisive laws that we've seen pass are like repellent for some of these more forward-thinking companies, like Samsung, for example. Lost out on a multi-billion-dollar facility in Samsung, and I think a big part of that was due to our bigoted ideology and legislation that's being passed and touted across the country. That's
it's a black eye for us.
Even really Phillips 66 will tell you, if we went around promoting that type of language and rhetoric, we would. It doesn't matter how much we pour into the schools and to the quality of life. If we're being discriminatory and bigoted, that's not going to attract the best recruits possible, the best employees, and certainly not going to retain the ones that we have.
Well, I think that's about all the time I have for this show this week. Mickey, I want to thank you again for appearing and giving us all your thoughts, ideas, and telling us what's going on with the legislature and the bills you have going through right now. Thank you so much for appearing on the show.
Kit, thank you for having me. I appreciate you keeping everyone informed, and for everyone who tuned in today, thank you so much.
Thank you. This is Across the Desk. We'll see you guys next week.